always want to call him Eric Young. He's not Eric Young. He is Erik Rogers, who works for Chris Young. Chris Young, but you specifically run sound.
I do.
We're back, baby. We've been wanting to do this video for a long time. We have been missing and missing and missing.
How long have we been talking about this?
Ever since we started this video, or doing this video series, and I'm hit just at a year, and we decided to do it on the worst day ever. It is hot as all get up here, and I soaked through my entire outfit. And I walked up and shout out to the Normal brand, Bradley up there, hooked me up with the whole new outfit because I was soaked, and you changed it. It's
I changed shirts too. It's
so hot. We're gonna do a portion here, go to the stage, and then we're gonna go to a seat area. But I want to start off here like we normally do, and let's start off with, I normally ask how you get into sound, all that stuff. So we're gonna skip.
Okay.
And let's do a quick run through of the console. I see we got a Rivage PM10.
Yes.
Why the Rivage PM10?
Why the Rivage PM10?
Yeah, have you always been on Yamaha?
No, I've been with multiple manufacturers over the years. I've Midas, S6L, Digico. When I got this job, they had already secured the production package from
you
Sound
walked
Image.
into a PM10.
I walked in, and they asked me if I had a problem with it, and I thought, oh, I'll spec the console that I'm used to. But they're like, no, you're going to use this. And I'm hip to learning new things, and it turns out that I absolutely love this console.
Awesome. You also got Waves, correct?
I do. Well, it's more than just Waves. It's an entire VST plug-in rack. It's called Yamaha VST rack. They make it. They distribute it with their new consoles. But essentially, any VST plugins. So with Waves, I'm running Waves, UAD, and something from Brainworks as well. But you can anything that's a VST plugin, you can totally use.
Awesome. And then a little bit of outboard.
And a little bit of outboard. Some of the outboard here, Chris's vocal actually comes down copper, analog into this. This is not inserted. That's his vocal line comes straight to here. So it goes,
oh wow,
vocal into here, out into the analog primary source enhancer. Then it goes into the desk and goes through all the desk processing. I can bypass it because there's an A input and a B input on every channel. So if something's not right or happens, then I can bypass it, and I have channel input and all those features. The same thing, but I wanted to keep Chris's voice analog all the way to me. And then the other thing is all of this here, the 5059 satellite, all of my subgroups, so drums, bass, acoustic stuff, guitars, they all go out into this. All the band instruments, they sum into output A, which subs into stereo A. All the vocal buses go out of B into stereo B, and to mix, since you can't go group to group on a Yamaha, I took these two stereo buses into a matrix, and that's where they...
Oh.
So what this does is essentially it takes 64 inputs and it turns it down to 2, band and vocal.
Yeah. That's genius.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too hot because we're baking it here. There's one thing that we're on TikTok Live earlier. We're showing a few things. Something that really cool that you showed me was your ISO box on stage.
Oh, yeah, let's go look at those.
Can we walk up there?
Yeah, for sure.
All right, guys, come on with me. We're going to go this way?
That way is fine.
That way. So this is very unique because we're literally on Broadway right now in Nashville. And if you look that way, this whole thing is going to be closed off. And you got delay speakers going down, all the way past
Bridgestone.
Bridgestone.
So I think past that church you see there, that church steeple.
I mean,
got speakers for days.
All right, let's go on stage. Did you have pants on earlier?
Huh? Yeah.
You did?
Yes. I always wear pants.
I'm just not used to seeing you with pants on.
I have 2 ISO cabs, or ISO boxes. So
now, who came up with this crazy idea?
they were here when They were here when I got here, so some other genius did, but I'm happy to take advantage of it. I know other artists have done this for years too. But this is Kevin Collier, our lead guitar player. This is his rig right here. And you notice there's speaker outputs on the out of the box, microphone outputs, or speaker inputs, mic outputs. And in here, he's got his 2 cabinets. There's an SM57 on each one of those cabinets. He likes to play loud. Lots of foam, all this stuff. All of a sudden, his loud is, it's great. It's good for his tone, and it's manageable where it's not hurting the rest of the stage.
Yeah.
We have another ISO cab over here. This is Ryan and Chris. So Ryan, our stage right player, he plays 1 amp, and Chris plays 1 amp. So Ryan likes to play very loud as well. So you see Chris here, it's just this Morgan AC40 with 1 microphone on it. Ryan's amplifier, it's got a Heil PR31 and an SM57 and a U-Haul blanket. And goes in there. So honestly, the loudest instrument on our stage is the drum kit. There is a bass cabinet underneath the stage where the bass player stands, but that's firing up for him. There's not much going on in that. I mean, there's the level coming out of it's nothing, is negligible.
And loadout for this has got to be fantastic.
Loadout for this is unplug cables, wheel it onto a truck. That's it.
I love that. All right, this is where we're gonna snap to us sitting inside somewhere.
No. 3 hours later.
This is where we come back in, and we're supposed to be in an AC building, but we're not in an AC building. We got a better view of Broadway.
Broadway.
Yes.
That's front of house, right there.
Yeah, it's so weird that it's like off.
It's side of house. It's
Yes.
like side of house.
You get a direct shot from the speaker. All right, couple questions for you.
Yep.
Let's back it up a little bit.
Okay.
What got you into running sound?
Honestly, I was 19 years old. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I know that I'm a bad guitar player. And I started hanging out at the local music scene in where I grew up in Dayton, Ohio.
Okay.
And the woman I was dating at the time, her friend was the drummer of the band, and they introduced me to this guy Jim, and I was basically getting paid like $50 a night and all the beer I could drink to carry a local band's stuff around. And then I started doing lights, and one day...
Wait, you did lights?
Yeah, I did. I did lights off of it was an 8-channel NSI foot controller, and I set up on stage. This is how, like, I didn't know, right? I would set up my little thing on stage, and I'm like playing the lighting console like it's percussion during the show. But the band was also kind of notoriously, I wouldn't say cheap, we'll say creative with their finances. And at one point they got rid of the local sound company because one of the
creative with their finances.
Well, half of them are still alive and are going to see this.
Okay,
so I'm not talking shit. I love you guys.
Yeah.
But the words, "Oh, Eric can mix it," came out of somebody's mouth, and I'm like, Eric can do what? And next thing I know, there's a venue in Cincinnati. It's gone now. It was called Jefferson Hall, and the house engineer there was also the house engineer for Parliament and Bootsy Collins and a bunch of guys. This guy, Alan, kind of took me under his wing, and I would go, after my job, I would go down to Cincinnati like 5 days a week and just start mixing bands, like under his supervision. And then I would take that knowledge to the band that I worked for, and it kind of snowballed from there. I had no idea that this was like a real job.
Yeah.
I thought that I would go work for a local audio company, and I wanted to mix Metallica. Because I thought, when Metallica comes to town, I'll be the guy, because they get a guy in every town. I had no idea that they have like a legendary guy who's been there forever. And I was really, really fortunate later on in my career to work for Thunder Audio, and I worked with Mick, and I learned so much from Big Mick, but that's like years and years later.
Yeah.
I just thought I was going to be Metallica's guy if I practiced real hard and got good enough. And then all of a sudden it turns out that I'm not going to be that guy. But companies will hire you, and then you can go out on the road. And eventually, company hired me. I applied to every sound company in the country, and finally Thunder Audio in Detroit took me on and sent me out on tour. And then eventually, one of the artists from Thunder hired me, and then it's all downhill from there, or uphill, really.
It's interesting because that's the number one question I get is how do I get started? And I think it's really as easy as like a production company or church. And
I would say production company or church, but the thing is, it's you can get a job anywhere. You can go get a job at the Hard Rock right now.
Sure.
If you go knock on the door and you tell them you want to work here and you show an initiative.
Yeah.
And I think I get a lot of people asking me, like, how do I get your job? But they're skipping the fact that I've been doing this for 20 some years, and I've swept the floors, I've soldered the cables, I've done monitors, I've patched the stage, I've done all the things, the growing to get out front, which, by the way, sound company people, I don't know why you put monitor guys on monitor desks before you put them out front, because monitors is infinitely harder.
That is funny because that is like the transition. You go from like pushing pushing boxes to patch guy to monitor engineer to front of house. It's so interesting to say that. It's always the way.
Yeah, and it's like, and I did monitors forever, and believe me, it's so much easier. I have one mix to worry about.
Yeah.
They trust me with my mix. Like, no one tells me how to do it. No one's looking at me, telling me to turn this up or turn this down. At the end of the night, if they have a bad night, it's not my fault. like the poor guy's stage left and gets all of the abuse.
Yeah.
He has to work so much harder. I would say, like, we all have a rudimentary knowledge of audio, and some of us know more than others. We're more experienced than others, but the person behind the monitor desk has to really know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the minute I could get away from all that and go out front, I did.
So you prefer?
Very much.
So would you say it's easier to go from front of house to monitors or monitors front of house?
I would say it's easier to go from monitors from front of house because that was my transition. But I have a friend of mine who he did exactly the opposite. He was a front of house engineer for years, and he got tired of it. He wasn't challenged. So he moved to the monitor desk and he became this like really in-demand monitor guy. But he had the patience of a front of house guy who's used to waiting for all the chaos up on the stage to be done. So he just took that patience stage left, and it's like, oh, he's cool.
So do you remember your first tour?
Dude.
Who was it?
It was nobody. It was a nobody tour. It was there was a website that was a competitor for MySpace. Okay. They don't exist. It was called mycollegedaily.com.
I've never heard of this.
That's because it didn't last. But there was a band from Buffalo called Displaced, and a rapper from somewhere in the islands called Collie Buds. And we were going around to all of these college bars and doing pop-up shows while we had a street team marketing mycollegedaily.com. And this was like the very early 2000s, so they had disposable, like 24 millimeter cameras, you know what I'm talking about? Those little paper cardboard ones. We had those things.
Crank, snap, crank.
Yeah, exactly. Like the coolest phone at the time was the I think it was T-Mobile had it. It was like long and skinny, and it flipped around.
Sidekick.
Sidekick. Yeah. That's it. Everybody had the Sidekick.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how long ago that was.
So was it a van tour?
No, we had a bus. We had a bus and a semi.
Okay.
Quite honestly, I was in a bus with a truck for the first few years. I've only done one van tour. It was the worst 45 days of my life, and I'm glad I had I had the experience, which is cool. But honestly, I got outside of that club tour for My College Daily. I started Thunder Audio sent me out on Avenged Sevenfold, like instantly. The first thing they did is they sent me out to Bonnaroo.
Okay.
And Paul Owen, who was my boss, he basically told me it was sink or swim. And considering I still do gigs for Paul to this day, I guess I swam.
You should ask him, did I swim?
He's like, Paul, did I swim? But yeah, they sent me out with Avenged Sevenfold and Deep Purple, Rod Stewart, Taylor Swift. Like, I was doing SE work for Thunder Audio, and then I did another little run with Avenged Sevenfold, and eventually their engineer, my friend Nigel, got sick, and they asked me to fill in. So all of a sudden, I got a taste of actually mixing the headliner. I'm like, ooh, this is. And I went and I asked my boss, I'm like, hey, they're offering me a job and a tour. I'd like to go, and I'm a loyal person.
Yeah.
So when Paul was like, I need you, like, no problem. And that's next thing you know, I'm out on Rod Stewart, and I'm doing some of these cool shows. But I postponed working for the artists out of loyalty for the people that got me to where I am. And then it got to a point where I was like, I'm getting way too many offers from the artist. You go into the office again, like, hey, I really want to do this. And I got their blessing to do it, you know, instead of burning a bridge or
that's
whatever.
Smart. That's smart. Do you remember the first, like, was there a moment for you that you walked in the show, you're like, and it was a big show, you're like, oh no, I might be in over my head with this.
Here now?
Really?
I still get that feeling every show. I really do. Like, there's always something that could go wrong, and there's no matter what we do, there's the element of somebody paid for this.
Yeah.
You're like, this is their favorite band, their favorite song. It might remind them of their whatever.
Yeah.
And I could screw that up.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that I'm afraid of the pressure, but I notice it, and I think it's very helpful to be cognizant and not be cocky about coming in there all cavalier, like I've done this 1,000 times.
Yeah.
'Cause I've done this 1,000 times, and I can confidently tell you that tomorrow's going to be an awesome show.
Yeah.
But I can also confidently tell you that in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh God, what's going to happen?
Yeah, I think it's that servant mindset as well. So, how'd you get connected with Chris Young?
Okay, so a long time, well, not a long time ago, 2016 or 17, I was mixing Dustin Lynch, and we were opening for Chris Young. Bill Cracknell, who was Chris's TM, he and I became friends.
Love that name, Cracknell. He needs to be a superhero. If not, then
he is a superhero.
Yeah.
So in the end of 22, I had some family stuff that kind of took me away from my gig, and I didn't know where it was going to go because I know my daughter needed me and I needed to be with my family. And I get a phone call from Bill in like the second week of January, and he's like, hey, so what do you got going on this year? I'm like, honestly, I don't know. I need to sort that out. And he's like, well, I got just the thing for you. And next thing I know, I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And so far, it's been an awesome run with Chris. Like, I've been here with Chris for 1.5 years. Everybody out here is family, and needing to spend time with my family is actually it's an important thing to notice.
Yeah.
Or to acknowledge.
Yeah.
That I needed flexibility to be. I couldn't go out for 6 months around the world. I needed to be able to be home and take care of my family, and Bill and Chris afforded me that. It's pretty cool.
So you've done several different genres, from rock to country, pop, I believe you said.
No, I haven't done pop. I take that back. I have done pop.
Okay.
I did a one-off for Ava Max, which I remember doing this one-off. It was in Boston. I was home, and I was working for Audio Spectrum at the time, just like the house guy. And Ava Max needed a front of house guy. I kind of recognize the song because it's all over Muzak wherever you go shopping.
Uh-huh.
Next thing I know, like, I'm line checking, 24 channels of tracks and some live vocals, and I'm filming it with my phone during the show, like sending it home to Paris, like, check this out, I want to mix pop, this is so cool. I was like into it.
So with doing all those, like, is your approach to mixing the same from rock as it is to country? Do you approach it a little bit differently, or is it still? I
would say the nuance between like rock, pop, country.
Yeah.
There's always nuance there, but my approach to mixing is pretty simple. Is like if it's played on a stage, it needs to come out of a speaker. That's it. I mean, and if you listen to whatever the source is, like, listen to the record. If you get a job with Chris Young, listen to Chris Young's record. If you get a job with Slipknot, listen to Slipknot.
Yeah.
And then figure it out from there, because the live element of the band, of course, is going to be a little bit different, but the gist of the song is still going to be the same. And start putting that. So my approach to mixing is just to try to keep it as close to what the reference is.
So with Chris, no backing tracks, correct?
None.
So let me ask you this, and I've been kind of pondering this myself. Like, do you feel it is we've lost a little bit of the artistry when we're dependent so much upon backing tracks. And I understand the need for time code, and you've got pyro and cryo, and you got LED, and you got all this. But do you feel like we missed a little bit of that artistry of playing live on stage and just being able to jam a little bit, or do you feel like it's still all?
I think it's still all there.
Yeah.
I think it's a very divisive subject. We talk about tracks, and I know that there's been some very famous, rock jocks that have something to say about tracks, and there's even some very famous artists that have something to say about tracks. But I've done Chris Young with no tracks in front of thousands upon thousands of people that were happy. And I've done other artists that had backing tracks in front of thousands upon thousands of people that were happy.
Yeah.
Our job is to facilitate happiness. Come on,
facilitate happiness. I love that.
We make rock and roll for a living. We're just roll with it, have fun. If you could play an instrument, I assure you would be complaining about tracks less, and you would be playing that instrument.
That's true.
So most of the conversation I've heard, of negative conversation about tracks, isn't coming from musicians.
Yeah.
It's coming from people who like to talk shit and pass judgment on the internet.
Yeah. So do you remember the moment for you that was like an aha, I made it moment?
There's a couple. It's steps in a ladder, right?
Sure.
I remember the first time I was mixing Avenged Sevenfold, and we were in Foro Sol Stadium in Mexico City, and this is that Big Mick moment, right, where we'd worked together for a few gigs with Thunder or whatever. I'm sound checking Avenged. It's my first stadium show, and it's massive. It's a baseball stadium. It's huge, and I see. I'm doing my thing, and I'm pretty confident it sounds good, right? And here comes Mick walking out front past the barricade, and he just stands in front of the console like this, and I looked at my tour manager. I'm like, did I just get a thumbs up from him?
You're like, yeah!
Yeah, I was like, I got a thumbs up from him, yes. And he's like, it sounds great. I'm like, yeah, I know. He said so. A couple other aha moments. One that really sticks out is there's a loudspeaker company called Alcons that I'm a big fan and supporter of. And this was 2020, NAMM 2020, like the last NAMM we had.
I was there.
I get a phone call to ask if I want to come to this demo of Alcons, and it was in the Masonic Temple in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. So sure, I rent a car, I drive up to Hollywood, and I walk into this room, and I'm not kidding, these are Brad Maddox, Greg Price, Gordon Reddy, David Morgan, and me. Oh, and Robert Scoville, sorry. Walking, and we're listening to this thing, and I'm like, I'm surrounded by greatness, and it's just like me, right?
Yeah.
And we listened to the whole system, and of course we listened to Scoville's pristine tracks from like the Latin Grammys or something like that. And we're all just like, how the fuck do you follow that? And there was like this kind of Q&A thing, and Greg Price was the first one to talk. And Greg Price goes, I'll go first. And like, this sounds great. But what happens when he or I get on it? Because, and I was like, I looked at a buddy of mine, and I was like, the only takeaway I got from that is Greg Price knows who I am. That's like the only takeaway I got. And
I know Greg Price.
Yeah. But what's really funny about that is if you look around, like we had Scoville was doing Tom Petty or Latin Grammys. We had Brad Maddox was Florence and the Machine, and we had guys that mix Fleetwood Mac, like pretty music, talented music, like music that you listen to with your mom and dad. And then you have Greg mixing Black Sabbath, and me at the time I was mixing Godsmack. So, and both amazing bands. He made a good point, like, hey, this ribbon driver sounds awesome, but what happens when he or I put the stick to it?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the answer was, well, Greg put the stick to it. And we put in multi-tracks, and we were blown away by how awesome this PA system was. A little less by me, because I was more blown away that, like, these people that I look up to somehow let me in the front door of their exclusive club. Like, I'm not allowed to take my shoes off yet, but I'm definitely in the door. It's pretty cool. So
that's awesome, man. Okay, let me ask this. You mentioned before about your family, and I think I had a lot of people who asked me about how to do this job, and I've mentioned this before, but like there's been people I've actually talked out of it because touring, you want to do it, but you don't want to do it. You don't want the 4:30 wake up lobby call. You don't want to be working every weekend and holidays. And honestly, especially if you want a family, it's not impossible, but it's very tough to do. How do you find that balance and still stay sane?
I'm sane.
How do you appear sane?
The first go around with being in a relationship and on tour didn't end well for me because I wasn't ready for it. I was actually a pretty shitty husband. Moving forward from that, my grandfather and I had the same birthday. Grandpa and I were very close. At the end, he was really sick with Alzheimer's and he didn't remember hardly anything, but when I would talk to my grandfather, he remembered me because we had our birthday together. And my grandpa was also a workaholic. So I was in Canada doing a gig for Ultimate Fighting. It was UFC 129. It was like the biggest Ultimate Fighting thing ever. It was in Skydome. It was huge. My grandpa died on Tuesday of that week. And I went to my production manager and I was like, I need to go home. And he looked at me and he's like, we kind of really need you here. And I was like, if I would have led with, hey, my grandpa just died, they probably would have changed it. But I didn't. I was trying to like keep my privacy, like, hey, I really need to go home. It's like, we kind of need you here. And I thought to myself, like, grandpa's a workaholic, he would understand. So I chose to stay at the gig. And we had a great show. And quite honestly, I've been beating myself up ever since for that. That's like the one big regret that I have. So when you ask how do people balance it, a lot of times it's trial and error and making the wrong decision the first time before you go around and make the right decision. So
what advice do you have to the people that are watching this, that are touring, that are struggling maintaining that balance and just feel kind of lost right now?
Make the right decision. And the right decision is, as much as I love the artists that I work for, as much as I love the people that I work with, they're your coworkers and your employer. They're not your family. And if your family needs you, there will always be another gig. And if you're working for the right people, they'll understand what family means, and they'll help you facilitate or to be with your family, or to do what you need to do for your family, and they won't penalize you for it. And that's like, I've surrounded myself with good people that I know that if my family needed me for something, I could be there. Paris, my girlfriend, we met on tour together. We're on different tours. We make time for each other. Like if she has a day off and I have a day off, we are looking at airplane rides to figure out who can go where, who can meet up, even if it's for a day, like you choose that person and you spend time with that person and you make it happen.
I wish I could take credit for this analogy, but someone gave me an analogy of we're constantly like juggling balls. So one of the balls is a crystal ball and the rest are rubber balls. And we can drop balls, but that crystal ball is a family ball. When you drop that one,
it's broken. Yeah.
The other ones are work and hobbies and other interests. It's okay to drop those, but never drop that crystal ball. My daughter, when I started touring, she was an infant. She'll be 17 this year. Yeah.
So, it's been her whole life. So my daughter gets it. But I'm not going to be home on her birthday this year. She knows it. And she'll tell me over and over again, it's okay, I understand, it's work. But the reason she's telling me over and over is not because she's telling me it's okay, she's telling herself that it's okay. Which, by the way, you're going to watch this, and something awesome is coming to you for your birthday.
It's this video, surprise!
To make up for the fact that I'm not there.
With all this chaos that goes on, how do you, and all the noise?
Oh, it's like just what these are the coolest barricade people, because usually barricade people
slamming it,
and they're like they know something's going on and they're being gentle. I love this.
That's fantastic. With everything that goes on with tour, busy, going noise all the time. How do you quiet the noise, personally?
How do I quiet the noise? I take time alone. I mean, I don't want to get weird. but
Get weird with it.
I meditate.
Okay.
I learned how to do some things. Shannon, the drummer of Godsmack, kind of taught me a little bit about guided meditation and self-guided meditation. And, if everything's going a little crazy, I'll take 5 minutes to myself. And meditation is no more than turning your brain off.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm not chanting. I don't have a mantra or anything like that. But I will. I'll hide in the back lounge, or I'll take a walk or something like that, just to clear my mind and just kind of focus on the moment that I'm in, whatever that moment is. I'm also in the process of losing weight and exercising, so
good for you.
I'm 30 down right now.
Good for you.
So I don't know what your angles are doing for me, but I'll go for a run. I'll go to the. I usually can't go to the gym run because for some reason on this tour they go to the gym right about the time that we're trying to do a line check. So our guitar player Kevin, he's got some kettlebells underneath the bus. I'll go use his kettlebells, or I'll go for a run, or I'll go for a long walk. I'll just get away.
Yeah.
And then come back refreshed, because positivity is an extremely important thing to me. And to bring a positive attitude out here on the road where everything's chaotic and everybody just wants to cuss everybody out for every little thing all the time.
Yeah.
When I start to feel that way, I just shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
And I take off for a minute and I come back, and then I can be my usual self that's cracking a joke about something and solving a problem instead of being the cause of one.
What tip or technique do you wish you would have known sooner?
As relates to interpersonal relationships or audio?
Let's do audio.
It's a tip that I pass forward. The kick drum is not the lead singer of your band.
The lead kick drum?
The kick drum is not the lead singer of your band. That was brought up to me 25 years ago by my first boss of this business. His name was Paul McDermott. And he's absolutely right. Just be true to the music and don't try to reinvent it.
Yeah.
Because there was a time, and I think maybe all of us go through it, where you feel like you got this God complex, this powerful feeling where you're behind the console and you've got all this power of these speakers, and that's not the gig.
Yeah.
The gig is reinforcement, not reinvention.
So how do you? I think this is the path for a lot of engineers, that it's the quantity versus quality. How do you? What's your advice to make that transition of just making a lot of noise versus actually placing things right?
SPL. Something I discovered is loud feels good, but it doesn't necessarily translate to sounding good. And I found when I used to mix bands here, and all it is just distortion, screaming vocal, drums beating the hell out of you, and guitars that sound like chainsaws. All of a sudden you start pulling that back and you start to find definition. You hear the ghost notes of the snare drum. You hear the articulation on the fretboard of the bass guitar. You hear those little runs where a voice kind of hits a loud note and then tapers off, and you hear it taper off because you're not fatigued anymore. So you have to get over that hump of, and it happens to everybody. The first time you're in front of a monstrous amount of PA, you want to use it.
Yeah.
But understand that this monstrous amount of PA is for coverage, not for firepower.
Sure.
And you can have the best sounding mix at a low volume, and it sounds loud and full. And you can have a shitty mix at full volume, and it sounds empty because your brain can't distinguish that information. Yeah. So I would say that the biggest advice I would have to bring out nuance is to quiet down.
Chris Young, how many inputs are you rocking?
60-ish.
Redundant as well with those? Or?
No, there's no redundant. So let's see, there's, of course, a redundant vocal microphone.
Sure.
But that's it. Everything else, it's just drums. Every guitar is double mic'd. Yep. But so that's a Haas effect thing, not a redundancy. So stage left guitars, you saw in the video where we have an ISO cab. Yep. Kevin plays 2 cabinets, so there's, for him, it's a left and a right cabinet. For me, it's a left and a right cabinet, but for him, he stands over here. So his left channel is delayed like 15, 18 milliseconds to kind of fatten him up and naturally steer him to the left. Ryan plays one cab, but I have him double mic'd, hard panned, and the right side of him is delayed a little bit. So you have some width of your guitars on stage, but nothing's redundant.
Okay.
There's no tracks. There's a steel. There's an extra input. This is Andy.
Hi. Didn't realize you were filming. I'm leaving.
I'm great, thank you.
Keep going, sorry.
There's another input, like there's the steel. We just take the stereo out of his amplifier. He has a third input for like a lap steel that we don't use. He just plugs that into his other steel channel and we're good to go.
Chris has such an amazing voice. And listening to your sounds check, you did such a good job of having him fit right in the mix with such great clarity with that. How did you achieve that?
So that goes back to several things. That Haas effect thing I was telling you about with delaying the guitar, one side of the guitars so they naturally kind of spread. But I also have a dynamic EQ inserted on both guitar groups that's side chained to the vocal, and it's
like a parallel compression to the...
Not at all.
Okay.
So there's one EQ curve, and it's from like 500 hertz up to 2.5K.
Okay.
And it goes down about 1.5 dB. That's it. When Chris is singing, that ducks that middle section of the guitar that much for his voice to cut through, but it's not enough to be noticeable. It's just like there's a whole... There's frequencies that are kind of in each other's way, and we make room for it.
Yeah. Okay, could you explain a little bit to people who don't understand of like crowding up frequencies and making space for that and why that's important?
Well, okay, so it doesn't matter if there's, how many, there's 18 boxes in this thing. Like, there's only, 4 speakers per box. And those speakers they all vibrate, and that's how they make noise. So if you have your voice making noise in this frequency range, and a guitar making noise in this frequency range, and the sample pad making... there's going to be loss because there's only so much that one speaker can do. So then you start placing instruments in space where they are on stage. Like, visually is a good way of doing it. It might be weird on our stage because the drums are all the way here and the steel's over there with it. But if you start panning things and moving stuff around in space, you find that middle where the vocal always needs to be.
I love that. Now, how do you, what's your advice to like, do you actually solo each instrument and do it by that, or do you listen to it in context to everything?
Now or in rehearsals?
Either. Because my point is with that, because if you're creating space, it may make the guitar not sound great
absolutely.
When you're trying to replicate that source tone. How do you find that balance?
So in
context of the whole picture.
Yeah, when we did rehearsals, there was a whole lot of isolating it. I have local monitors out front where I can solo things up instead of I have headphones as well, but those can be speakers in my face of like, this is their voice the same as the PA, so it's like right there, right? And in rehearsals, we did a lot of listening and tuning and mic placement movements and like all these little nuanced things. So now when I come out here and we line check, everything's good to go. But periodically through the show, I will take a listen. I'll solo through. And so like, say for the guitars, good example. There's 2 mics for that guitar going into a group. The mics themselves, on Kevin, since they're both SM57s, they are unaffected. They're high passed at 90, and that's it. There's nothing else going on in those channels. I EQ him on the group because I want to hear what those 2 mics are doing together and then clean up what those 2 mics are doing together instead of doing twice as much work for 2 channels and then rebuilding it.
Yeah.
But I'll listen to that. I will also listen to, I'll hit the guitar and the vocal, and I'll cue those up in headphones and listen to them together to hear if there's anything weird, if there's any distortion, if Chris is, because he's a dynamic singer and he's got some loud parts, but he's also got that country low frequency,
great voice,
quiet thing. And if we're trying to do a little guitar highlight when he's singing down low, then I need to move that guitar out of the way.
Yeah. Okay. What was the next question I was going to ask you? Oh, are you a subs on aux person?
No.
Or no? Okay.
No. No.
Why not? Because I know some people are diehard, like, I'm going to send my sub on aux. What's your thought process to that?
Because no matter what, you cannot break the laws of physics. So if your console is, if your inputs and outputs are properly time aligned, then you send your main feed and it's got whatever processing you have in your mains. If you're sending an aux-fed subs, it's already out of time because you don't have the same processing that you have on the left-right. So no matter what, it's phase incoherent. Not to mention, we don't hear in 2.1 or 5.1 or 11.1. We hear in 2.
Yeah.
That's it. We hear in left and we hear in right. And we're able to discern like that golf cart there, I can hear it moving, but I hear it moving based on where it's coming into this ear and reflections coming off of that wall.
Yeah.
So adding another send to that, having that golf cart also go to the sub so I can feel it rumbling.
Yeah.
Now all of a sudden it's going that way, but it's still rumbling under my feet, and that's really weird. So
what do you feel like separates good engineers from great engineers?
Patience. I was just visiting Toby Francis the other day in Florida, and my daughter,
Shout out to Toby.
my daughter looked at Toby and said, "You're really good at this." And Toby just looks and smiles and goes, "Thanks, I've been practicing." I thought that was the funniest, most like realistic thing. Like, I know how amazing Toby is. Like, he's a mentor to me.
Yeah.
And yet here he is, very humble and patient to talk to a little kid about mixing sound.
Best piece of advice you got from one of your mentors?
Okay, there's one. Big Mick told me never to be afraid of the C word.
Okay.
I don't know if you can use that or not.
Sure.
But don't let one moment ruin the whole show. So it was here in Nashville years and years ago. I had an input on stage that just was, it was a cello, it was feeding back, it was a struggle. And I got it under control in what I felt like was a lifetime. And what was reality was maybe 20 seconds. And I was freaked out about it because there's a room full of people, and I had invited some engineers that I looked up to come see the show. And I was like, oh God, this is terrible. And it was Russell Fisher that just puts his hand on my shoulder and goes, "It's a moment. It's a moment. Let it go."
So good.
Let it go. And like I was just able to tell him that at the Sound Image shop like 6 months ago. I'm like, by the way, I don't know if you remember this, but back in like 2008, we were at the cannery and you told me this. He's like, I don't remember it. I'm like, that's like one of the most profound things that has ever been told me. And I've taken it so far that I've used it with artists where something goes wrong or their mic wireless goes bad or like whatever, pick your thing, right? And they're freaked out about it at the end of the show. And I'm like, hey, that's a moment. That's a moment that this crowd got and tomorrow night's crowd's not going to get.
Yeah.
Like, it's just rock and roll. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Like, you finish the show, everybody's happy. And that paying that advice forward has paid me off in dividends. Like, I can never thank Russell enough for giving me that info because every time I give it out to somebody, they feel better.
That's amazing. So what's your advice for when I know I've had this and I know you've had this, when you're out in the weeds, it's just not going well, everything seems overwhelming and you're just in the weeds moment. What do you do in that moment?
Do your job. Just do your job. The sun will come up tomorrow. Like, hey, the show's gonna happen or it's not.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. Just do your job. Realize that you're here doing this because somebody believes in you. Either somebody believes in you or you bullshitted your way in. And if you bullshitted your way in, this is your chance to shine.
Yeah.
If somebody believes in you, this is your chance to shine. If you look at everything as an opportunity, whether it's a positive or a negative, if you look at it as an opportunity, you'll always work.
Well, man, sorry about that time. If people want to follow you on social media, where can they follow you?
At Erik M. Rogers on Instagram. Erik Rogers, I don't know what my Facebook is. Instagram, Facebook. Those are my two big ones. I think I have a Threads, but I never check it. I have a TikTok, but I never check it. Like, TikTok is there just to check in on my daughter's TikTok activities.
He's watching.
But yeah, Instagram is where I usually do. Let's do that whole thing all over again. We'll start this over again.
Well, man, thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been great. Give me some.
Yes. We finally got it,
in the
baby.
making.
Yes.